In this video, we will examine some of the reasons why people commit evil acts. Much of this work comes from the field of social psychology, which looks at social influences on human behavior. The factors we look at are prejudice and discrimination, conformity and obedience, group membership, and aggression. These concepts explain why we humans are capable of doing such horrific things like crime, war, and genocide. To give you a sense of the type of depravity humans are capable of, here is a video showing the Rwandan genocide.
A political assassination triggered one of the biggest mass killings in history, the Rwandan genocide. On April 7, 1994, a government-backed campaign of mass killings started in Rwanda. The aim was the ethnic cleansing of an empowered minority group. Hutu extremists massacred hundreds of thousands of ethnic Tutsis and their Hutu sympathizers. In the next 3 minutes, we'll briefly cover how the genocide unfolded and look at how Tutsi-Hutu hate was fostered by colonialism. Within a span of 100 days, at least 800,000 people were killed in the most rapid genocide ever recorded. During this period, 6 people were murdered every minute. Dead bodies were piled up on roadsides as people were encouraged to kill their neighbors, women were raped, and even the lives of children were not spared. The killing spread to all corners of the country and the violence unfolded before the eyes of the international media.
This is what so much of Rwanda has been turned into. Houses, villages deserted, every few yards a dead body, and everywhere the stench of death.
The world knew what was happening, but Rwandans were left alone by the international community to face this dark chapter in their history. But the ethnic divide and hatred that fueled the genocide did not come from nowhere. It has its roots in Rwanda's colonial history. Rwanda is a small country, nearly 5 times smaller than New York State. It was colonized by Germany and Belgium and then gained independence in 1962. In 1994, its population was estimated at 7 million. 85% was from the Hutu ethnic group, 14% Tutsi, and 1% Twa. Hutus and Tutsis are 2 distinct ethnic groups, but they have a lot in common. They speak the same language, live in the same areas, and adhere to similar traditions. But disagreements between the majority Hutus and minority Tutsis had grown substantially since the colonial period. When Belgian colonists arrived in 1916, they radicalized the differences between the 2 groups. They established an official register classifying Rwandans according to their ethnicity and pushed racist theories of the supposed genetic superiority of Tutsis. They classified people according to stereotypical physical features, and everyone was given a racial identity card based on these classifications. These pictures of a Belgian specialist in the 1930s show how craniofacial and body measurements were done to ethnically classify Rwandans. Later, these classifications became instrumental in identifying and killing Tutsis during the genocide. The Belgians favored Tutsis and considered them to be closer to Europeans and superior to the Hutus, guaranteeing them better jobs and educational opportunities. This discrimination gradually led to resentment among the Hutus, culminating in a series of riots, killings, and the mass exodus of Tutsis to neighboring countries. After Rwandan independence in 1962, Hutus won the country's first elections, reversing the power dynamic. The regime that followed was staunchly Hutu nationalist, and in the following decades, periodic violence continued. In 1990, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, RPF, a rebel army mostly comprised by Tutsi exiles, started launching attacks from Uganda, with the aim of replacing the Hutu-led government. In 1993, after a period of conflict, a peace accord was signed between Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana and the RPF, but the agreement failed to stop the violence, as many on both sides disagreed with it. The events of April 6, 1994 were the final nail in the coffin. President Habyarimana, a Hutu, was killed when his plane was shot down in the capital Kigali. Although responsibility for the attack was never confirmed, extremist Hutus saw this as an opportunity. The Rwandan Presidential Guard immediately initiated a campaign of retribution. The slaughtering of Tutsis and moderate Hutus began. Extremist Hutus known as the Akazu managed to take over key positions of the government and initiate ethnic cleansing throughout Rwanda. Hutu militias, Interahamwe, went village by village, slaughtering Tutsis with guns and machetes. Citizens were encouraged to join, and militias used a radio station to exhort people to go out and kill their neighbors. The human cost was huge, bodies lined the streets, hundreds of thousands of children were orphaned, and a hunger crisis struck refugees and the displaced. The genocide had ended with the RPF overthrow of the Hutu regime in July of 1994, but it left a lasting impact that spilled over to neighboring countries.
Prejudice is an unjustified negative attitude toward members of a particular group. It involves emotions, cognitions, and behaviors. Discrimination, on the other hand, refers only to the action component of these three. To illustrate this, if a person of color is denied a job because the owner fears white customers won't buy from a black salesperson, that is just discrimination. But if the same white owner denies that job because he doesn't like blacks, then that is both prejudice and discrimination. Prejudice is acquired in many possible ways. It can be learned by observing others, through scapegoating, and as the result of in-group favoritism. Our focus here will not be so much on the causes or the effects, but on how to reduce it. Psychologists have found that this can be done in a number of ways. The first is cooperation. Here, groups that cooperate together towards a common goal show lower amounts of prejudice. In contrast, those that compete with one another show more. In contact, groups that have more contact and experience together under conditions of close interaction, common goals, and equal status get along. Retraining is also possible. For example, by getting people to pay attention to similarities rather than differences between groups. This sometimes goes by the name of racial colorblindness. And then there's empathy. Prejudice can be reduced by getting people to simply take another person's perspective, to imagine what the world might be like from someone else's point of view. Conformity is a change in the way we feel, think, or act because of a real or imagined group pressure. It also has multiple causes. We feel a need to be approved or accepted within our group to maintain our social status. Sometimes we do this because of the influence of an in-group role model. For example, if we see a prominent politician or celebrity making anti-Semitic remarks, we may be more likely to adopt them. Conformity takes a dark turn when we follow unethical orders, what is known as obedience. This frequently takes place in response to commands given by an authority figure. Stanley Milgram's classic experiment is the best example. He had people posing as scientists issue orders to subjects which involved the actual fake administration of electric shock. Of course, the subjects did not know this was simulated. And what he was surprised to find was that 65% of the participants obeyed completely, giving out the maximum 450 volts. Why would so many people do something they know was wrong? One explanation is that we are socialized to listen and respect authorities. Another is that once we start doing something, we tend to continue doing it. What is the so-called foot in the door technique? We have seen that many human social groups are hierarchical, where obedience to authority is expected. This may explain why soldiers sometimes commit atrocities and report they were, quote-unquote, only following orders. One way to counter this is by refusing to follow orders, what is called civil disobedience. Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to white people on a bus in Alabama in 1955, disobeying the Jim Crow laws. She was arrested, and this helped spark the civil rights movement. Another example is Gandhi's fasting to protest British colonial rule in India. These instances show that sometimes all it takes is one brave person to stand up and set an example. We tend to adopt the roles assigned to us within a group. In the Philip Zimbardo prison experiment, students were asked to play the mock roles of prisoners and guards in a fake prison. After a short while, the quote-unquote guards began beating and abusing the prisoners. fulfilling their expectations of the role. It is unfortunate, but as members of a group, we often do things we would never do as individuals. This study demonstrates the role of de-individuation, where we feel less self-conscious, inhibited, and personally responsible as a member of a group than when we are alone. This is especially true when we are anonymous. De-individuation helps to explain the increase in vandalism on Halloween when people are wearing masks, or why cyberbullying occurs on the internet. Aggression is any behavior intended to cause psychological or physical harm to another individual. There are certainly genetic and biological influences on aggression. It may have been selected for because it's unfortunately frequently rewarded by obtaining resources or social power. It can also be elicited by a variety of aversive stimuli like heat, pain, or bullying. Aggression can cause us to do bad things to others. So how do we reduce it? It was once thought that the catharsis model of aggression, in which we act out aggressive impulses like hitting a pillow or yelling at a wall, would reduce aggression. It turns out that, in fact, the opposite is true. Acting out aggressive impulses actually makes us more likely to experience aggressive feelings. A better way is to substitute incompatible responses like empathy and humor. For instance, telling a joke or showing sympathy for someone has been shown to reduce anger and frustration.